What's up, everyone? We are diving back into the multiverse today for another epic. What if Naruto was exiled and returned after 8 years as the Fox Emperor with 4 Queens Part 1? And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this and comment for next part. And now let's start the fanfic. Tsunade Senju, the Godime Hokage, was staring blankly at the view from her office. There were several papers on her desk to sign, but frankly watching the falling rain was much more interesting, despite having seen it every day for the past 8 years. Ever since that damn day she lost a loved one once again. Lightning momentarily illuminated the village she ruled, even though it was now clear that no one within the council respected her power. Those damned power-hungry idiots acted against her and behind her back at every opportunity, and it was their own fault that the village was now in such a critical situation. For 8 years now the sun seemed to have disappeared from their lives, and that constant storm was just one of the reasons why Konoha was no longer the strongest village. The constant rain had ruined all crops across the land of fire, and simple things like wheat and rice were now costing 10 times as much as they had 8 years ago. All this because we have lost our son, whispered Tsunade, remembering a young blonde-haired shinobi who wore only orange and who wouldn't stop calling her Granny. The young boy in her mind was Naruto Uzumaki, the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi, and the one who had managed to convince her to return to that damn village, who was banished from Konoha 8 years ago after successfully completing a mission. Yes, completed, not failed. One of Naruto's teammates, Sasuke Uchiha, had the brilliant idea of betraying the village and leaving to join Orochimaru so that he could gain the power to kill his brother and avenge his clan. Obviously Tsunade had no intention of letting him go, as Orochimaru was far too dangerous, and it was obvious that he wanted the Uchiha so he could take over Sasuke's body and the Sharingan, so she had assembled a team to be able to stop the fugitive and bring him back to Konoha. Unfortunately, due to the attempted invasion of Suna and Oto, the village was not in good shape and many ninjas had been assigned to continuous patrols or reconstruction work, so the roster from which Tsunade could choose the members of the team was very limited, and in the end he had opted for a newly promoted Chunin and 4 genin including Naruto. Fast forward a day and the team had returned with 2 genin on the verge of death. The mission had been successfully completed. Sasuke had been defeated by Naruto himself, while Orochimaru's bodyguards had been killed by Konoha's genin who had been helped by Gaara, Kankuro and Temari, sent as reinforcements by Suna. Then, everything had fallen apart. Tsunade had been busy for hours trying to save the life of Choji Akamichi and Neji Hyuga, so the council had decided to act without first consulting her and had sent a letter to the Fire Daimyo warning him of what happened, specifying how Naruto had lost control of the nine-tailed fox, how he nearly killed the last Uchiha, and how there was an organization known as Akatsuki that was hunting the 9 Biju, making Konoha a target as 2 famous missing nin had already snuck into the village. Thanks to those idiots, the daimyo had become terrified of having Naruto in his land and had ordered him to be banished from Konoha, the land of fire, and all their allies. Naruto was to leave the village within 24 hours and the land of fire within 3 days, and if he were found within its boundaries, he would be killed. Tsunade remembered perfectly the moment when, after having summoned him before the whole council of Konoha, she had had to banish the young boy whom she now saw as a son or a grandson. His eyes, devoid of the liveliness and life that had always distinguished him, still haunted her today in her dreams. Naruto didn't say anything, he just gave her his headband along with the necklace he had won in their bet. Tsunade wanted to refuse it, but he turned quickly and walked away, ignoring the smug grins of the council members on the civilian and shinobi side. Only the various clan heads had said nothing, knowing that the boy was not at fault. The last thing she saw of him was the long, cold glare he threw at the room behind him before vanishing forever. As if he cursed us, and in a way he succeeded. Tsunade shook her head, remembering the small victory she had had when all their allies had broken off trade deals with them. The shocked and scandalized faces of the members of the council were absolutely hilarious to her. Too bad that now she found herself at the head of a ship destined to sink slowly, especially with Oto, Iwa and Kumo ready to strike a fight now that Konoha was so weak. Tsunade-sama. Said woman looked towards the door, where Shizune had just entered. The requested team has arrived. Send them in. Unwillingly, Tsunade sat behind her desk with the hands closed in front of her face, and after a few seconds, a group of ninjas entered the room. The most recognizable of all was undoubtedly her former teammate, Jiraiya, who would perform the function of team leader for the important mission that Tsunade was about to assign them. Joining him were Team 7 and Team 9, also known as Team Kakashi and Team Guy, although the only difference was that Naruto's place in Team 7 was taken by a pale boy named Sai at the insistence of Danzo Shimura. And speaking of Danzo, Tsunade made no secret of her irritation at seeing him enter her office with Homura and Kaharu. "I don't remember calling you two," she hissed at them, but while the last two scowled at her, Danzo merely stopped near her desk, looking at the other shinobi. "This mission is of vital importance to the village. It is normal that we are also present. If you hadn't done your own thing as usual, there would be no need for this mission either. The least you could do is stay locked up in a hospice while I try to resolve the situation you have thrown us into," replied Tsunade without pulling her punches before focusing on her shinobi. "Everyone, I'll be straightforward. Konoha has been in dire straits for the past 8 years. With the loss of our allies and the various trade deals, the economic situation is dire and we are now receiving fewer and fewer clients. To try to resolve the situation, you have been instructed to go west beyond the great mountain range that separates the land of the earth and the land of the wind from the rest of the world. There you will find the Alvarez Empire, where an important tournament is held with 50 chests full of gold up for grabs. Your job is to win the tournament. You will also need to get an audience with the Emperor and try to make him an ally of Konoha," said Danzo, earning a glare from Tsunade for interrupting her. "You have to make sure that he is interested in us and our village, and that allying with us is the best solution for both of us." Jiraiya scratched the back of his head. "Don't get me wrong, I want Konoha to go back to what it used to be, but how are we supposed to make him think that? We don't exactly have much to offer." Kaharu handed him a scroll. "Here is everything you need for the mission, all that we are ready to offer is marked. Try in every way to convince him, even offer him to come here to visit so that he can see the village." Quote. Tsunade could not believe the stupidity of these people. Were they really hoping to persuade an emperor to ally with them after showing him a village on the edge of the abyss perpetually battered by rain? Someone now thought that Konoha had become a second aim. She then glared at the three elders. "What are you plotting? There is practically nothing we can offer to an emperor. Instead we have something that he does not have, and it is the Sharingan," said Danzo with his usual calm. "We do not know if the emperor is young or not, or if he has sisters or daughters, but if he does, we will propose an arranged marriage with Sasuke Uchiha. In that way, Konoha will be linked to the royal family and the emperor will not be able to deny us an alliance." However, what he did not say was that he had every intention of having the emperor and his family assassinated. First, Danzo would use his special Sharingan to make the emperor appoint Sasuke as his only heir, and thus Konoha would gain complete control of the whole empire and its resources. "I have the impression that you are not telling the whole truth," said Tsunade while narrowing her eyes. "It doesn't matter whether you believe my words or not. This mission already has the authorization of the council and the daimyo, so it cannot be cancelled." The one called the Darkness of the Shinobi looked at the assembled team. "You have your orders, now go." "Not Jiraiya, I have to talk to him in private," said Tsunade, sending a glare toward the elders who walked away, while the Toad Sanin he ordered the others to get ready and be found at the gate in an hour. Once everyone was out, the white-haired man turned to the Hokage. "What did you want to talk about, Tsunade? Did you find out anything?" the Hokage asked, knowing full well that Jiraiya would guess who she was referring to. Jiraiya frowned at her. "Are you still hoping to know something about Naruto?" "Tsunade, 8 years have passed and no one has seen him. None of my spies have found anything. It is now obvious that the Akatsuki took him the moment he left the village. You can't be sure." She slammed a fist on her desk. "It was you who told me that the Akatsuki hasn't done anything since he disappeared, so they can't have taken him. He is out there. Even if he were out there, what would that change? The daimyo has not yet revoked the order for his exile, and if he were to return, what would change? What if he loses control over the fox again? I love this village, but I don't really want to end up in the Shinigami's belly for playing with its seal," shouted Jiraiya with Tsunade glaring daggers at him. "Minato would be ashamed knowing what you have become. Now go away. You have to hope your mission is successful or there won't be a second chance. Jiraiya looked at her angrily but did as requested and left the office through the window, leaving Tsunade alone. The Hokage could only sigh before looking again at the village in the rain that went on relentlessly. I really hope you are okay, Naruto, and that you are in a better place than this hell. Having prepared themselves properly, the various members of the team had found themselves in a bar with their former classmates from the academy for the last time before leaving. Their Jonin sensei were who knows where, but they knew that they would soon find them at the village gate. So you're leaving for the Empire, huh? Must be nice to leave this place once in a while, said Kiba with Akamaru sitting at his side, although I don't understand how you can hope to ally the Empire with Konoha. Suffice it to say right away that they can be affiliated to the Uchiha clan and they will immediately agree to ally with us. I bet the Empress would also prefer an elite like me rather than the Emperor, proclaimed Sasuke with such arrogance as to make people vomit. Although he had tried to leave the village, no one had pointed to him as a criminal, and indeed they had defended him, proclaiming that Orochimaru's cursed seal had been the cause of his behavior. Over the past 8 years, Sasuke had become a Jonin, having Kakashi as a private teacher but also receiving training from other shinobi on the council payroll, making him one of the most promising and strongest ninja in the whole village, whereupon many civilians were starting to say he should be Hokage right away. Troublesome Uchiha, has it not occurred to you that perhaps the Emperor and the Empress are not interested in an alliance with us? Asked Shikamaru with a calm voice, looking at the clan head of the Uchiha clan. Other than jutsus, a few weapons and maybe arranged marriages, we have nothing to offer. Out of the corner of his eye he saw Hinata wince and could not help but feel pity for the young Hyuga, since, according to his father, she was among the possible candidates for an arranged marriage with the Emperor himself, in case he accepted mistresses or concubines, along with Hana Inuzuka and Ino Yamanaka, who was not at all happy to be used as a bargaining chip. An elite Uchiha like me is worth so much more than that, grinned Sasuke. Also I understand that you have not even been considered for a wedding. Shikamaru narrowed his eyes before looking away. Troublesome. I just hope everything goes well. The last few years have been tough for the family business, grown Tenten, since her parents ran a shop of weapons and equipment for ninjas, but given the economic crisis and the scarcity of missions, no one was going to buy any more and therefore sales had plummeted. Like her, many others were feeling the weight of that crisis. The Akamichi clan could no longer rely on large quantities of food and therefore all its members had lost weight, thus losing the ability to effectively use many of their jutsu. The Hyuga clan had had to donate much of its wealth, like all the other clans, to fill the village coffers and therefore could no longer afford elegant kimonos or luxury items. The various shinobi of the village were forced to work hard to be able to bring food to their families, and now the available missions were increasingly difficult and dangerous. An alliance with the Alvarez Empire was their only salvation. It's all Naruto's fault, snapped Sakura, earning a glare from Hinata. If that fool had applied himself to the academy instead of thinking about pranks all the time, he wouldn't have had to use his demonic powers and by now we would still have our allies and enough food for everyone. Sakura, you were there too when Tsunade-sama explained that Naruto had been sabotaged throughout his academic years. Even Iruka-sensei confirmed this, so there was no way for Naruto to stop Sasuke without using the fox's power, said Shino with his face hidden like always behind his jacket and sunglasses. After Naruto's exile, everyone had learned of his status as a Jinchuriki, and while many were convinced that he was actually the Kyuubi in human form, Shino's analytical mind had led him to understand that Naruto was simply a boy who had been stripped of the possibility of living a normal life and therefore had nothing against him. It's still his fault, hissed Sakura before paying for her drink and leave the bar, shortly followed by the rest of the squad assigned to the mission in the Empire. Hey Shika, do you think the mission will be successful? Asked Ino, hoping in the meantime not to be given in marriage to the Emperor or even worse to some obese and old noble. Shikamaru groaned while looking outside. I don't know, on one hand they could win the tournament and ease the situation here in Konoha, but on the other hand Sasuke could say something offensive or even act his own way, and that would only make the situation worse. This is too troublesome. Do you think the Empire could declare war on us? Asked Choji while eating the only loaf of bread available in their meal. I sincerely hope not. but if they do, Konoha is done for. All right everyone, get ready, said Jiraiya looking at his squad. We are about to enter the land of spring and sadly the ninja of Konoha are not welcome, so we will enter using a henge. Here are your fake passports in case of checks, also from here on we will go at a regular pace to avoid suspicion. Jiraiya-sama, why did we come here north? I thought we were going west through the mountains, asked Tenten after performing her henge. Because this is the fastest way to get to the empire. 2 years ago it appears that the land of spring and the land of waves entered into a trade deal with the Alvarez Empire, and this is an additional reason to ally with them, explained the Sanin while walking toward the closest city. From the land of waves you can reach the empire by sea, while from here a long railway departs that takes you directly to the capital or so they say. An hour later, all 7 ninja were seated inside a carriage and the train had left a few minutes ago, leaving behind the verdant lands of the land of spring. After a few minutes the onboard attendants, complete with an escort of samurai, came by to serve them snacks and drinks, then leaving them alone. I wonder why there were samurai on board with them, asked Sakura while sipping her coffee. Earlier, I heard some civilians talk about it, said Guy with a serious face. It seems that in the months following the inauguration of the railway, some bandits and missing nin attacked the train, so now there are armed escorts all along the way. Still, it's pretty strange, noted Neji looking around. The train is made up of 10 carriages and yet only 20 people got on board. I thought there were a lot more people interested in going to the empire. Most likely because people still fear for a possible war. After all, the empire was born only 3 years ago and only recently seems to have settled in with regard to territorial disputes and other problems. The inhabitants of here prefer to enjoy the benefits of their alliance by staying at home rather than going to a foreign land, explained Jiraiya with the others nodding at his words. Tenten ate some cookies before asking the Sanin, by the way, Jiraiya-sama, what can you tell us about the empire? As you just said, it has only been around for 3 years, but there has never been much news to Konoha. It doesn't surprise me as even my spies have a hard time discovering anything new. All I know is that until 3 years ago the territories that make up the empire were constantly at war with each other, and the situation had been going on for many years, perhaps since before the beginning of the Warring States period. For so long? Asked Rock Lee with shocked eyes, so those lands had been at war for at least 300 years. Pretty much. Nodded Jiraiya. The difference between them and us is that on this side it was mainly shinobi and samurai who waged war on behalf of the feudal lords, but on the other side of the mountains apparently there are other sentient races besides humans and there are also demons and other evil creatures that roam the lands. It is very likely that due to their differences they have fought for years and years out of pure hatred or something. Then, like a bolt from the blue, the wars came to an end and all thanks to the man who would later become emperor. Little is known about him but apparently he is a great warrior and has the support of the entire empire. As the others wondered what kind of person this emperor was, Sasuke snorted, it does not mean anything. If all those lands were unable to prevail against the others, it means that they were all weak. If we had tried to invade them years ago I would have been able to conquer those lands alone. Neji rolled his eyes. I doubted Uchiha, with your arrogance you would have simply found a united front ready to kill you. As if you could do better, Hyuga. I still wonder why you are here, since your skills are so much lower than mine. Shot back Sasuke with his Sharingan shining in his eyes. Enough, both of you, said Kakashi looking at the two. We have a mission to accomplish and we cannot fight among ourselves. Sasuke, don't activate your Sharingan. If there were any ninjas nearby, they could sense your chakra and understand who we are. The two Jonin glared at each other for a few more seconds before letting go, causing Kakashi to sigh. And I was worried about winning the tournament, thought Jiraiya with a sigh. With such a team it will be a miracle to get to the empire alive, let alone win a tournament. After a long 5-hour train ride, the 7 shinobi finally arrived at the empire's capital, Vistarian. Immediately they could see how the architecture was of the highest level and the sun shining on the city gave the whole an almost surreal air. Without wasting time, Jiraiya and the others got off the train to be able to start their mission. However, after a few steps they were immediately surrounded by men in silver armor with covered faces. Jiraiya of the Sannin, state your reason for being here and the reason you and the other Konoha ninjas came to the Empire in disguise. Asked the only man without a helmet and with a blue cloak over his shoulders, with light purple eyes, the same color as his short spiky hair. I think there is a mistake here, my good sir. Said Jiraiya doing his best with I am not dangerous tone of voice. You see, my family and I are visiting from the land of spring, I don't know any Jiraiya. The man in front of them narrowed his eyes, placing a hand over his sword, lying in the face of a holy knight, as well as a knight of the round table, is a serious affront. Now sweating bullets under his henge, Jiraiya looked around, noticing how the other men in armor had put their hands on their weapons as well, but just as he was about to try again to deceive those guards, an all too familiar voice reached their ears, "That is enough, Lord Lancelot." Looking to the left, they saw a man dressed in black shinobi clothes approaching them with a calm step and, although only his eyes were visible, Jiraiya, Kakashi and Sasuke immediately recognized that person. Itachi. Stopping a few paces from them, Itachi lowered the mask that covered his face. "Hello, little brother. We haven't seen each other in 8 years, have we? What are you doing here, Itachi?" Growled Sasuke, dispelling his hence, having now realized that their cover was blown. "It seems obvious to me. I'm preventing you from making a big mistake and ending up in the dungeons of the capital. I doubt you could hold out over there for more than 24 hours. Replied Itachi with a calm voice, looking at the man with purple hair. "Lord Lancelot, please forgive them, they are not aware of the customs of the Empire." Lancelot watched him in silence for a few seconds before nodding. "I'll leave them to you, but the Emperor and the Empresses will want to know of their presence." Itachi nodded at his words. "It is my intention to guide them to the palace within the hour. If you are headed there, please notify them of our arrival." "It shall be done." And with those parting words, Lancelot left with his knights behind him. Left alone with Itachi, the various ninja of Konoha cancelled their henge as the people around them continued to walk without paying attention to any of them. Among them, Sasuke was the closest to attack Itachi, but Kakashi put a hand on his shoulder to stop him. "Why are you here, Itachi? Is the Akatsuki trying to destroy the Empire from within?" Asked Jiraiya with serious eyes, but the older Uchiha shook his head. "I am no longer a member of the Akatsuki, now I am one of the shinobi in the service of the Emperor, and now I go by the name of Itachi Hayabusa." "What?" shouted Sasuke with his Sharingan spinning wildly. "Not only have you slaughtered our clan, but now you have also given up your clan name. Have you no honor? Honor is a wasted word for a shinobi like me. Now I am part of a clan more aimed at order and balance rather than war. Despite my sins, they accepted me as one of their own and I intend to repay their kindness to the end," explained Itachi before motioning them to follow him. "Come with me. It is clear that you want to talk to the Emperor in addition to wanting to participate in the tournament that will take place tomorrow. Why are you helping us?" asked Kakashi, keeping Sasuke from attacking his older brother. "As long as I remember, you weren't on good terms with Konoha. Those days are in the past as long as you behave here," replied Itachi without looking at them, "and as for helping you, let's just say I'm doing it in honor of the old days. As mentioned before, if I hadn't been there, you would have all ended up in the dungeon by now." MPF, as if some man in armor was enough to stop an elite like. "Have you become so weak that you are afraid of even such garbage, Itachi?" asked Sasuke with a cold glare, but his older brother merely shook his head. "Foolish little brother, that man was Lancelot, one of the strongest knights in the Empire. His mastery with the sword is such that even all 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist would seem like novices by comparison." While Sasuke scoffed, clearly not convinced, the others widened their eyes in surprise upon hearing the comparison used by Itachi. "If you want advice, avoid picking a fight with anyone. This is the capital and is full of strong warriors loyal to the Emperor. Many of them would make the 3 Sannin look like genin. Are you sure you're not trying to scare us now? I can accept swordsmen as strong as legends, but even multiple warriors stronger than me, Tsunade or Orochimaru. In my opinion, you are exaggerating. Feel free to think of it however you want. I won't save you again should you get in trouble." Without further ado, the 7 shinobi of Konoha followed Itachi along the streets of the capital, stopping from time to time to admire the landscape, observe the various shops or buy books on the history of the empire and a tour guide of the capital. One thing they immediately noticed was the large amount of people and how happy and carefree they were all. There were also, in addition to humans, men beasts, men and women with particular pointy ears, those who looked like real demons and even large animals that could speak, although the latter did not appear to be the result of a summoning like Jiraiya's toads or Kakashi's dogs. This place is incredible, whispered Rock Lee with his teammates nodding. Sure it is, did you see those weapons? I want them so badly, whined Tenten while pointing to a shop belonging to a blacksmith where one of those pointy-eared men was talking to a white-haired man with cat eyes and two swords on his back. Their tour lasted for about 40 minutes before Itachi led them to the entrance to the huge castle in the center of the city. Nodding to the various guards at the gate, Itachi led them inside before stopping when he saw two men dressed in white arrive, the first with blue eyes and hair, while the second had green eyes and black hair. Grimmjow, Ulquiorra. Itachi bowed his head. I didn't know you were back at the palace. TCH, we're leaving now. Here everything is boring and the situation in the north seems to have moved a little, growled Grimmjow without looking at the others, while Ulquiorra was actually staring at them with his haunting green eyes. Konoha shinobi. Itachi nodded. They are here to see the emperor. Arching an eyebrow, Grimmjow looked at them one by one and finally grinned with amusement. What are stray dogs like them doing here? Weak people should stay away from the empire. What did you say? Snapped Sasuke before falling to his knees with the others when a strong aura of oppression crushed their bodies, while Itachi and Ulquiorra remained indifferent to this. I said weak people like you should stay away from the empire. Runt, grinned Grimmjow standing in front of them. Do you happen to have such weak ears that you can't hear me? When neither of them answered, the aura of oppression seemed to fade and without further ado, Ulquiorra and Grimmjow left, leaving behind a group of shocked shinobi. What was that? Asked Sakura with a pale face. I told you not to pick fights with anyone, said Itachi with a calm voice, looking at them. Those were two Espada, a group of elite warriors in the service of the Third Empress, just as Lancelot and the Knights of the Round Table are in the service of the First Empress. How many empresses are there exactly? Asked Jiraiya, with his mind ready to record everything in order to write his next masterpiece of the Ika Ika Paradise. 4. Each of them with their own group of special warriors as bodyguards, explained Itachi while walking inside the palace. The fourth empress is currently in the west to face some wild demons, while the other three are expected to be in town. An empress is fighting? Asked Tenten with the esteem for that woman which was already increasing dramatically. The former Uchiha nodded. Both the emperor and the empresses are warriors, and when the situation calls for it they always go to the front lines to fight. It is also for this reason that they are respected and loved throughout the empire. If so, it might be easier to get them to sign an alliance with us. If the empire still has enemies, Konoha could help them in exchange for their resources, thought Jiraiya, thinking of all possible options to successfully complete the mission. Finally, after a few minutes spent wandering along interminable corridors, Itachi stopped in front of a huge golden double door, where waiting for them they found what looked like a butler, even if his golden eyes with black sclera and red glow were somewhat surreal, and Jiraiya, like the others, had a bad feeling about that guy. Ah, Itachi, welcome back, said the butler with a smile on his face. I see you brought our guests safe and sound, although I swear I sensed Grimmjow's aura just now. Grimmjow and one of the guests had an argument, but now it's all settled, Diablo, explained Itachi, without mentioning who had had the quarrel with the Espada. Can they already enter? Diablo nodded without losing his smile. But of course, the three empresses are already in the throne room and the emperor will arrive shortly. Itachi thanked him before turning to the others. My work here is done, now I have to go back to my patrol area. Remember what I told you. Now wait a moment, Itachi. I got stronger and stronger to finally be able to kill you. Sasuke growled, drawing his sword. You don't really believe I'll let you go without a fight, do you? The former Uchiha shook his head, clearly disappointed with his younger brother. Now you don't have time for these things. Fighting inside the palace is strictly forbidden, but if you really care that much about fighting me, 2 days from now, after the tournament, I will come to you and we will fight. Satisfied? Sasuke narrowed his eyes. Who tells me I can trust you? I'm a member of the Hayabusa clan now. If I give you my word, I am bound to keep my promise. Sasuke, accept his word. It is clear by now that he is not going anywhere, said Jiraiya, forcing the Uchiha to put away his weapon, and without another word, Itachi walked away, leaving them with Diablo, who was still smiling. Now before you enter, I remind you that you will be in the presence of an emperor and 3 empresses. Once inside, you will kneel where the red velvet carpet begins and will not stand up until the hearing is over. You can raise your head to speak, but you can speak only when required. Breaking these few simple rules will win you a night in the dungeons of the castle. When Jiraiya nodded, after throwing a warning glance at Sasuke, Diablo turned to the doors that began to open by themselves and after a few seconds made his entrance, followed by the ninjas. Announcing the arrival of the Konoha's shinobi, following Jiraiya of the Sannin. Diablo said in a voice that echoed through the huge throne room, before stepping aside and standing by the doors that closed behind them. Walking very calmly, the Toad Sannin scanned the entire room, admiring the white marble columns, the huge colored windows placed above and the various banners hanging from the ceiling, and then concentrating solely on the 5 thrones made of black marble with golden veins, placed at the top of a short staircase, side by side, at the end of the room. The leftmost throne was currently empty and the crest railing had been carved to look like a lion's head. The throne to the left of the first had the crest railing depicting some warrior god, and, currently sitting on the throne, there was a young woman with long black hair with green eyes, wearing a long blue dress that left different parts of the body uncovered, combined with long white gloves, white boots reaching up to her middle calves and a feather boa of white fur. The rightmost throne had a crest railing depicting a sharp-toothed shark, and sitting on that throne was a woman of rare exotic beauty, with olive skin, aqua green eyes, thick eyelashes, and short golden blonde hair, kept messy with 3 braided locks. Her incredible body was covered in wide white pants and a white jacket with black details, protected in places by white armor that looked like it was made of bones. The throne to her right, on the other hand, had the head of a dragon as a crest railing, and a blonde woman, with green eyes like emeralds, was seated on that throne, wearing a perfect combination of silver armor and a blue dress, complete with a red cape outlined by white fur. All in all, those were among the most beautiful women Jiraiya had ever seen, and he was sure their bust was on the level of Tsunade's. Finally, the central throne was currently empty, yet the Toad Sage felt a shiver run down his spine when he saw the crest railing, as it was shaped to depict the head of a fox with sharp teeth and long ears. Jiraiya-sama, whispered Kakashi, having also noticed the detail of the central throne. Hush, I saw it too, replied Jiraiya before kneeling in the required spot and keeping the head bowed like other shinobi. Luckily Sasuke hadn't done anything stupid yet, even though Jiraiya was sure he saw jealousy in Sakura's eyes. The last thing he needed them was for her to start thinking of the empresses as rivals in love. Jiraiya of the Sannin, to what do we owe your presence in our empire? Asked the empress with the red cloak. Multiple reasons, my empresses. First of all, we are interested in participating in the tournament that will take place tomorrow, as long as there are no rules that prevent us from registering, of course. Said Jiraiya after having raised his head to look at her. The second reason for our presence in your lands is to propose to you and the Emperor a possible alliance with Konoha and the Land of Fire. Also, if I may ask, he waited for a few seconds, and when he saw that none of them seemed bothered by his request, he went on, could we know your names? So that we can refer to you correctly, as calling you all empresses could cause confusion for us, unaccustomed to your royal presence. Moments of silence greeted his words before the black-haired woman chuckled in amusement, I don't see why not. I am the second empress, Minerva. Closing her eyes for a moment, the woman with olive skin then opened them, staring right at Jiraiya with far too coldness in them, I am the third empress, Haribel. Finally, the last empress took a breath, and I am the first empress, Artoria. Remember our names well, as everyone in the empire knows them and who they are associated with, and to answer your question, no, there are no rules prohibiting you from participating in the tournament. Yes, we will not fail to remind ourselves. Forgive us for our ignorance. Jiraiya bowed his head, thanking them, but before he could ask them about the possible alliance, the doors behind them opened again and Diablo's voice echoed throughout the hall, announcing the arrival of the Emperor of the Alvarez Empire. Slow and heavy footsteps were heard between the walls of the throne room, as the most powerful man in the whole empire advanced close to them, and after a few seconds, when he was to their right, the various shinobi could not resist the temptation and looked slightly in his direction to see his face. What they saw made them turn pale with fear or turn red with madness, for the man who could save Konoha, the one who had the empire at his command, was none other than Naruto Uzumaki. The young blonde man, dressed in magnificent silver armor, slowed down for a moment and looked them straight in the eye, showing them a grin that seemed to make them squirm even more. It lasted only a moment before Naruto continued to approach the thrones, before stopping in front of Harabel and kissing her hand. "You are as beautiful as ever, my darling." Harabel smiled at him. "Your words are more than welcome, my beloved." He then moved towards Minerva and kissed her hand too. "Glad to see you again, my love. I missed you so much. And I missed you too, my emperor. I can't wait to make up for lost time," replied Minerva with a warm smile on her face. Naruto then approached Artoria and kissed her hand as well. "My queen, red looks great on you. It's Empress now, my love." Artoria giggled at his words. "Apologies, sometimes I still live in the past." Naruto chuckled before slowly sitting down on his throne and watching the shinobi sent from the place he once called home. All of them were looking at him with eyes filled with shock, fear and anger, but he didn't pay much attention and focused his attention on Jiraiya. "Welcome, my dear godfather." Hearing his words, Jiraiya paled even more. "It's been a while, hasn't it?" Those were harmless words, but Jiraiya was sure that with those few and simple words, Naruto had already sealed the fate of Konoha. A fate full of death. "Welcome, my dear godfather. It's been a while, hasn't it?" Naruto, the one and only, grinned Naruto, even though there was no warmth behind that grin of his. "You seem very surprised to see me, almost as if you didn't expect to find me here." Well, can you blame me?" asked Jiraiya, forcing a smile on his face. "I haven't heard from you in 8 years. Why, you look well." The emperor nodded while leaning against his throne. "Yes, but certainly not thanks to you, my excuse of a godfather." "So you know about that?" "Yes, I am aware of everything. It's amazing how many things you can discover the moment you start chatting with a giant immortal fox sealed inside you, by your own father to top it off," growled Naruto while glaring at the Sannin. "Tell me, Jiraiya, do the people of Konoha know about all this? Of my parents? Of my heritage?" Jiraiya swallowed before shaking his head. "They only know about your Jinchuriki status. As for your parents, not many people know." "Kakashi-sensei, what is he talking about?" asked Sakura while looking between Jiraiya and Naruto. "Yes, Kakashi-sensei, why don't you explain it to them? I'm sure you failed to explain certain things while you were obsessed with training the traitor," said Naruto with Sasuke glaring at him, but the moment he activated his Sharingan, he was crushed to the ground by a pressure far worse than that of Grimmjow. "I don't think we've given you permission to speak or raise your head, Uchiha. You better remember your place before your head rolls away from your body," hissed Harabel with a yellow aura surrounding her body, while Artoria and Minerva were glaring at him with cold fury. After a few seconds, Sasuke completely lowered his head, deactivating his dojutsu and grinding his teeth at the insult he had just suffered. Releasing a long sigh, Kakashi glanced at Naruto before shifting his gaze to Sakura and the others. "Naruto full name is Naruto Namikaze Uzumaki. He's the son of the Yondaime Hokage, Minato Namikaze." Everyone, except Guy, who was already aware of it, widened their eyes in surprise, but in the case of Sakura and Sasuke it was evident that they were not believing his words, since if it were true, Naruto would have been practically a noble of Konoha, while Sai decided to file that information for later, so as to report everything to Danzo. "And yet, I was boycotted my entire life before being unfairly exiled. I think this shows how Konoha has fallen from the days of my father, who would be ashamed of you, Kakashi. Your days as a sensei are an insult to everything he has taught you," said Naruto with his cold eyes focused on his former teacher, who was now sweating under the pressure. "Not only did you show clear signs of favoritism towards Sasuke, but you didn't even try to defend or help me 8 years ago while I was being exiled. Well, you have to understand me, Naruto. Sasuke needed help with the Sharingan and he showed more potential than you." The last words died in his throat when a pressure far more oppressive and evil than the others was felt throughout the room. and the giant aura of the Kyuubi appeared behind Naruto, whose eyes were now blood red. I advise you not to test my patience further, Kakashi, or you will die here and now. Kakashi could only nod before the aura faded, allowing them to breathe again, but it was now clear that hearing the fox's chakra again had deeply shaken them. Satisfied with his work, Naruto turned to Artoria. My beloved, what were you talking about before I arrived? Nothing much, my emperor. She replied, looking at him with a calm face. The Sannin told us they are here to compete in the tournament and would also like to propose an alliance with Konoha and the Land of Fire. Is that so? Naruto looked at the shinobi in front of him with an amused smile, and Jiraiya was afraid that Naruto would stop them from participating in the tournament before driving them out of the empire. And what exactly would this alliance entail, Jiraiya? From what my spies tell me, you don't have much to offer given the crisis you're in. So he already knows about our situation. This could be a big problem, thought Jiraiya before looking at his godson. Your Majesty, if you were to agree to ally with Konoha and the Land of Fire, there would be a trade agreement between us, and once we get out of the economic crisis, you would have all our support in case of war here in the Empire, as well as we would have your support in case of war in our lands. I know now the situation is not the best in Konoha, but I can guarantee you that if you help us, we will pay you back. We can also offer jutsus and weapons, as well as arrange weddings with the Konoha clans. That's all. Jiraiya's eyes widened in surprise. What do you mean? Is this all you can offer for an alliance? Asked Naruto with bored eyes, mimicked by his wives. This is an empire, Jiraiya. Weapons. I have so many weapons that many are piled up in warehouses without ever having been used. Jutsu. While I have shinobi in my military, they are perhaps 10% of my army, and all of them have their own personal jutsu that they can use. Arranged marriages. Explain to me how such a suggestion could benefit my empire, Jiraiya. Well, I'm sure you remember the various clans of Konoha. The Nara are famous for their intelligence, the Yamanaka possess mind-bound jutsu, the Inuzuka are excellent hounds thanks to their partners, and I'll stop you right there, Jiraiya, said Naruto, raising a hand. What you do not seem to understand is that even in my empire there are such people. Here in our lands there is not only the chakra, but also many other forms of energy, all with their incredible applications. Smart people. There are several academies where the most brilliant minds of the empire are gathered. Mental skills. There are dozens of humans and demons who can fight using their minds. Ninja alongside dogs. Please, we even have dragons here fighting alongside us. And before any of you try to use the Sharingan card, I remind you that Itachi belonged to the Uchiha clan, so the Sharingan is already part of the empire. Here, Naruto allowed himself an amused smile as he saw Sasuke stiffen, most likely on the verge of rushing towards the blonde-haired emperor to attempt to kill him. What about the Byakugan? Proposed Neji. Despite being against the idea of an arranged marriage used as a bargaining chip, our dojutsu is famous in all lands and we have multiple clan members willing to marry someone in the empire. Naruto looked at Neji, raising a hand to stop Artoria, who was now close to punishing the Hyuga for speaking without being questioned. Has your clan's situation changed in the past 8 years? Neji stiffened for a moment before looking down. No. Then you already know my answer to such a proposal. In case I decide to grant someone in marriage to the Hyuga clan members, they would all be branded with the caged bird curse mark, and I bet the clan elders would like any offspring in Konoha, away from the empire so they can keep their eyes safe. Growled Naruto, with clear disgust in his voice. In fact, I bet all those idiots in the council would want the eventual offspring of every marriage confined to Konoha, where they would grow up to your ideals so they could use said children's power at will, right? Jiraiya wanted to tell him no, that wasn't their intentions, but deep down he knew perfectly well that people like Danzo, Homura and Kaharu would do anything to keep those children in Konoha, away from the empire. Your silence is a more than obvious answer. Naruto shook his head. 8 years in Konoha has not yet learned to be humble. You want it all but give nothing in return. You are really pathetic, however. Jiraiya looked up at his godson, hoping that Naruto still cared about the fate of the village where he was born. Today I feel particularly generous. Let's do it this way. If one of you manages to win the tournament tomorrow, in addition to the promised reward, you will also get an alliance with the empire, said Naruto, shocking them all. Do you accept? Are you serious? Do we have your word on this? Asked Jiraiya in a hopeful voice. But of course. Naruto grinned at them. When Naruto Uzumaki promises something, he really means it. Now Diablo, I am sure our guests are tired from the long journey. Walk them to the exit so they can find themselves a tavern. Of course, Your Majesty, said Diablo with a bow, before gesturing for the shinobi to follow him, although it was clear that Sasuke would rather stay and fight Naruto to make him understand who was the real elite among them. You are really evil when you want to be, my love, said Minerva with an amused smile, mimicked by her husband. What can I say? Konoha always brings out the worst in me. Now, how about going to relax a bit in our rooms? I want to see how Mito, Kushina, Arthur and Minato are doing, said Naruto with his wives nodding at him before leaving the throne room, to finally be able to spend some time alone with their loved ones. Are you all ready? Asked Jiraiya while looking at the others, who nodded at him. Good, let's go and win this tournament. That said, Jiraiya and the others walked towards the entrance to the huge coliseum that stood at the edge of the city. The titanic structure used for the tournament was easily 5 times the size of Konoha Stadium, and the number of people attending that event was impressive. Once near the entrance, they were all directed to the access for the fighters before being led to a small room overlooking the arena. Just us, wondered Tenten looking around. This room is for us. When we signed up yesterday, they told me there is a room for each place of origin, so to speak. Depending on where the participants arrive, they are placed in different rooms, in order to avoid fights or discussions between challengers. Explained Jiraiya, while looking at the stands in the arena. Originally, he, Kakashi, Guy and Sakura were supposed to be mere spectators, but given Naruto's enticing proposal on the alliance, they couldn't take any chances, and so everyone had signed up apart from Jiraiya, as groups from outside the empire needed a representative who couldn't fight in the tournament, and Sakura because they feared that the doctors of the empire might try something in case some of them were injured. When will the first fight start? Asked Sasuke, itching for a fight so as to prove to the Naruto who was the real elite between them. I'd say now. A series of explosions echoed throughout the arena as brilliant fireworks exploded in the sky and a small pumpkin-headed figure appeared in the center of the arena. The little humanoid twirls around the arena as the crowd cheers at his arrival, until he stopped with a bow. Hello folks, I'm Mato, the referee of the tournament. Welcome to our unification tournament. The event that celebrates the birth of the empire and the end of all wars in our lands. The crowd cheered even more, and it took several minutes for it to calm down. However, none of this would be possible if it weren't for all the heroes who risked their lives for us. First of all, the imperial family. A round of applause to our emperor and our empresses. With one arm, Mato pointed to the huge grandstand where there were 5 simple thrones, and Jiraiya immediately noticed in shock the presence of 4 children as well as Naruto and his 3 wives. Listening to what Mato was saying, inciting more and more the crowd, the blonde green-eyed, 2-year-old child in Artoria's arms was the first prince, Arthur. In Haribel's arms, on the other hand, was the second prince, Minato, a child perhaps 1 year old, with short blonde hair and blue eyes but with a complexion similar to that of his mother. Sitting comfortably on Minerva's legs was a 3-year-old girl with long black hair and blue eyes, the first princess, Mito. Finally, in Naruto's arms was the second princess, Kushina, a 2-year-old girl with long red hair and blue eyes. I don't believe it. That loser has kids, shouted Sakura while her words were drowned out by the cheering crowd as Naruto and the empresses greeted the crowd. The Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi has 4 children, 1 for each empress most likely. Danzo-sama will want to know about this, thought Sai, looking at the children so as to be able to draw them in his report. To his right, Jiraiya was also staring at them with serious eyes. Judging by their age, they must all have been conceived after the empire was born. Kushina, Minato and Mito. Naruto must know all about his family if he has decided to call his daughters with those names. The fact remains that in Konoha they will do everything to try to plan marriages with his offspring. The time has finally come to kick off the tournament, proclaimed Mato with the crowd going even more wild than before. Let's start immediately by presenting the first 2 contenders. The first of them is known throughout the empire for his flames and his skill with the sword. one of Rimuru Tempest's most loyal warriors, his military commander-in-chief. He is Benimaru. One of the two inner gates of the arena opened and entered a boy with short red hair, with two small black horns and a long sword held horizontally on his back. The crowd cheered applauding as Benimaru arrived, while Jiraiya and the others were surprised to see his horns as well as the strange aura that hovered around him. What the hell is he? A demon? Asked Neji, staring at him with his Byakugan, feeling oppressed by the sheer amount of power he saw within the swordsman, while not being chakra. Sakura shot Naruto a glare. TCH, go figure if that demon was not going to surround himself with his fellows demons and monsters. And now his opponent, considered one of the strongest vampire in the empire. Her control over earth and crystals is incredible and she has proven it over the countless years of warfare. One of Ainzo Oal Gown's special guards, she is Evely. What looked like a little girl wearing a white mask and a red cloak made her entrance into the arena to be cheered by the whole crowd, before stopping a few meters from Benimaru. It's been a long time, Ogre King. Benimaru showed her a calm smile. At least a year if I'm not mistaken. We last met in the city of Tempest when your master came to visit. Now I'll explain the tournament rules for everyone. The fights will be single elimination. Each fight has a maximum time of 30 minutes, and if there is no winner by the end of the time, the one who has suffered the least damage will be declared the winner. Said Mato with the two fighters nodding without looking at him. During the battle, everything is allowed but it is strictly forbidden to kill your opponent. When one of the two participants is made unconscious, he has no way to fight anymore or he gives up, he has lost. Evely and Benimaru immediately began to release power from their bodies, and Mato quickly stepped back. That said, let's kick off the first match of the tournament. Begin. Benimaru quickly vanished in a burst of speed, reappearing in front of Evely with his sword drawn and engulfed in black flame to attempt a swing at his opponent. However, she quickly moved a hand and a wall of crystals rose from the ground, blocking the swordsman's blade. Releasing even more power, Benimaru managed to destroy those crystals, but Evely had already moved, before moving a hand towards him, crystal lance. Benimaru promptly raised his blade with which he defended himself from the large bullet thrown by Evely, but he was thrown backwards several meters. He then hurled 3 fireballs before sprinting at Evely, but she quickly created crystal daggers to intercept his magic and then wrap her right hand in blue magic and crystals, before blocking his blade with a violent punch, creating a violent shock wave that was felt throughout the stadium. Grinning in satisfaction at the fight, Benimaru vanished along with Evely before sporadically reappearing throughout the arena with his opponent, creating cracks in the ground and shock waves with each impact. After several seconds of relentless fighting, he attempted a swipe from above, but she vanished into thin air before reappearing above him. Maximize magic. Shard buckshots. Dozens upon dozen of crystals were fired from a magical circle created in front of her, and many of them hit Benimaru before he made a violent slash of black flames that destroyed all the remaining bullets, forcing Evely to move, but she was still wounded by those flames in her right arm. Landing a few meters away from him, she tilted her head. I know what happens when you start enjoying a fight. How about ending it with one last attack? Benimaru didn't lose his grin, nodding to his opponent before enveloping himself in a dense aura of black flame as Evely was surrounded by a blue aura and the ground beneath their feet began to tremble with the intensity of their power. Grabbing his sword in his right hand, Benimaru swung it forward, releasing an immense beam of black flames just when Evely created a magic circle and from it shot a giant dragon made of crystal. Black Inferno. Crystal Jaw. The gigantic explosion that resulted from their attacks shook the entire stadium, and most of the audience was forced to cover their faces with their arms due to the strong hot air, while Jiraiya and the others watched everything with shocked and fearful eyes. What the hell was that? Asked Sakura with clear fear in her eyes. Beside her, Sasuke, Kakashi and Neji were speechless as none of them had been able to follow the movements of Benimaru and Evely while they moved quickly around the arena. Furthermore, the two owners of the Sharingan had not been able to copy even one attack, in addition to the fact that they hadn't sensed even a drop of chakra in the air. I don't know, said Jiraiya, noticing the smirk on Naruto's face, directed right at him, but something tells me that our chances of winning this tournament are lower than expected. In the arena, meanwhile, The huge cloud of dust and smoke had completely cleared and everyone could see Benimaru standing with the tip of his sword inches from Eveli's mask, who sighed shaking her head, "I can't believe a child has overcome one of my most powerful spells." Benimaru smiled at her while Mato announced his victory and advancement to the next round, with much cheer from the audience. "Sorry to disappoint you, but Rimuru-sama chose me as a general for my strength as well." Right. Evely shook his hand before walking away with him waving at the crowd, then disappearing in a burst of black flames. With their departure, Mato returned to the center of the arena. What an amazing way to start this tournament. And there are still 7 fights in the first phase. After a few seconds of applause, he pointed towards the door through which Benimaru had entered. "Now, here's the first contender of the second fight." In their room, Jiraiya and the others watched in shock as Neji was enveloped in white light before vanishing into thin air. What they didn't know was that the young Hyuga had just been teleported behind the arena gate, and just as the gate opened, he heard Mato's words. Straight from the Far East, a prodigy of the Hyuga clan of Konoha. He is Neji Hyuga. Slightly shaken by what just happened, Neji took a deep breath before walking into the arena, only to be overwhelmed by an immense wave of bloodlust and insults from all over the stadium. Looking around, he was shocked to see that even simple children were glaring daggers at him, with so much nastiness that it was unthinkable to associate her with such young people. This bloodlust is insane," whispered Tenten looking around, while feeling that oppression on her shoulders. Jiraiya nodded with sweat running down his face. "I can only think that everyone in the Empire knows about Naruto's past and what he went through Konoha in his youth." Sakura looked at him with shocked eyes. "What? But that means. It means we're at a distinct disadvantage," said Guy with a serious face. "Their hatred for Konoha must be on a par with that of the Sandaime Tsuchikage." Back in the arena, Mato waited several seconds before raising his hands to calm the crowd, enjoying the feeling of discomfort visible on Neji's face. When the crowd had finally quieted down, he turned to the second door, and now his opponent. Legendary ninja known throughout the empire, the clan head of the new Shirai Ryu. Known by his allies as Hanzo Hasashi, his enemies only know him as Scorpion. Instead of walking into the arena, Neji's opponent appeared in a pillar of fire a few meters away from him, wearing a yellow and black vest with a particular mask, and the crowd erupted in jubilation as he arrived, deafening Neji and the other ninja of Konoha. After a few seconds, Mato took a few steps back and Neji assumed his fighting pose while activating the Byakugan, but Scorpion stood still, with his arms folded. "Let the second match of the tournament begin. Fight." Neji didn't hesitate a moment before sprinting forward, however he saw Scorpion turn around before vanishing in a cloud of smoke and flames, and, before the Hyuga could react, he felt a tremendous twinge of pain in his right leg. Neji did not know how, yet Scorpion immediately got behind him and hit him with a hard kick in the leg, knocking him to his knees, but Neji still managed to turn around to attempt to hit his opponent, however Scorpion grabbed his left wrist with the right hand. Konoha's shinobi didn't even have time to defend himself as Scorpion yanked him forward in order to hit him in the nose with his right elbow, breaking Neji's nose with a loud crack. Scorpion then hit him with a front kick in the chest, knocking him several meters away. Coughing up spit and blood, Neji staggered to his feet and held a hand to his chest, where he could feel several cracked ribs. "He's monstrously strong. I feel like I'm fighting Guy-sensei." "Those eyes won't help you here," said Scorpion while slowly walking toward him. "You shouldn't rely solely on your gift, it will blind you to everything else. The Byakugan is what made my clan strong and feared, and I will use it to defeat you," replied Neji before throwing 3 smoke bombs on the ground. Thanks to his eyes, Neji could perfectly see his opponent in the smoke and took the opportunity to try to hit him, but Scorpion blocked every attempt without any problem. "How is it possible? He can't see me." Aiming at the face with his right arm, Neji's eyes widened in shock as Scorpion vanished again in a cloud of flames and was unable to protect himself when his opponent reappeared behind him, hitting him with a flying kick engulfed in flames that sent him out of the cloud of smoke. Neji was still in midair when a kunai attached to a metal rope lodged in his right shoulder, making him scream in pain, and from the smoke he heard a voice from hell. "Get over here." Neji was yanked violently into the now clearing smoke and Scorpion grabbed his throat with the other hand before causing a burst of flame that knocked the Konoha's shinobi to the ground with horrific burns to his throat and chest. With his mind full of pain and disorientation, Neji could barely see Scorpion lift a foot before darkness claimed him. Neji is no longer able to fight, shouted Mato pointing at the masked ninja. The winner of the second match is Scorpion. The crowd erupted in cheers and compliments for the infernal ninja as Scorpion turned to face the Emperor and his consorts before placing his right fist over his heart, bowing and then vanishing in a cloud of flames and smoke. Man of few words, but he definitely knows how to fight, said Minerva with a smile while stroking her daughter's hair. I'm still surprised how you managed to get him to join us years ago, my love. Naruto smirked at her. Let's say we have a lot in common. Oddly, it was easier to talk to him than to Sub-Zero. He then looked at the arena, where a small group of doctors were carrying Neji away on a stretcher. I think I will fully enjoy today's tournament. I will as well, my dear, nodded Artoria with a smile on her face. Our son is looking forward to a fight with your former comrades. Naruto chuckled a bit. I just hope Mordred won't be disappointed. The number of worthy challengers is very low where I come from. Back in the arena, Mato got ready to announce the next fight. Well folks, I don't even know if what just ended can be called a fight. The crowd laughed at his words, ignoring the angry and indignant looks of the Konoha's shinobi. However, we must go on with the third fight. Now, the first contender. Straight from the Far East, she is known as the mistress of all weapons. She's Tenten Kenzuru. Just like with Neji, Tenten had been teleported moments before her announcement, and despite the anxiety in her heart, she entered the arena with her head held high and was immediately engulfed in insults and bloodlust. Despite having sensed it shortly before, Tenten could not help but be intimidated by all that pressure and several drops of sweat trickled down her face. Mato then turned to the other door, but before he could announce Tenten's opponent, the door was thrown open violently by a gust of wind accompanied by countless red and white butterflies. In the silence that followed, a figure began to advance in the arena and Tenten immediately understood that it was a woman, observing with interest her winged helmet from which long red hair came out, but above all the long sword attached to her right arm. Heed my words, said the woman in a soothing voice that sent shivers down Tenten's spine. I am Malania, Blade of Miquella. Moving her right arm, she sent a light wave of air toward her opponent. Mato quickly moved away from the two opponents and started the fight, but before Tenten could even hope to grab one of her weapons, Malania grabbed her face with her left hand, shocking her. When did she? Malania threw Tenten on top of her before impaling her with her sword, piercing her belly, but her opponent vanished in a cloud of smoke and was replaced by a log of wood. Looking slowly behind her, Malania saw Tenten several meters away with eyes filled with shock and fear. Taking a step towards her, Tenten seemed to come out of her shock and began hurling kunai and shuriken in large quantities, yet the swordswoman avoided them all with quick, fluid steps. How is it possible? Not even Rock Lee can avoid that many bullets without even getting hit once. Deciding to go straight to the hard way, Tenten took a scroll in her hand and opened it, pointing it at her opponent. Exploding Dragon Strike. A large fire dragon was released from the scroll, but Malania cut it in two without any difficulty, shocking Tenten again, and she began to retreat before reaching for the large scroll she carried on her back. Opening it, she launched the scroll into the air before activating one of her most powerful attacks, and she rained down a multitude of weapons against his opponent, who jumped high, preparing to strike and, strangely enough, seemed to almost stop in midair. Waterfowl Dance. In a very rapid series of slashes invisible to the human eye, Malania moved forward at an incredible speed, destroying all of Tenten's weapons before stopping exactly in front of her opponent, who had already put her hand to another roll. Unsealing Technique. Segmented Iron Dome. A large steel dome was summoned around Tenten, and the kunoichi let out a sigh of relief, thinking she finally had a few seconds to catch her breath. However, Malania tore apart her defense with a few swipes and opened long cuts on Tenten's body, knocking her away. Tenten fell tumbling to the ground several meters away with her body covered in blood, without moving. The match is over. The winner of the third fight is Malania, shouted Mato with the crowd cheering at her win, but Malania merely nodded toward Naruto before walking away without looking at her opponent. Sakura, said Kunoichi, looked at Jiraiya with fearful eyes. go to the infirmary and help Neji and Tenten, then stay there. I'm afraid you'll have more patients soon. The pink-haired girl wanted to protest, but a glare from the Sannin convinced her to move, and in seconds she was out of the room to go and heal her companions. Kakashi looked at the white-haired man. Jiraiya-sama, this is a disaster. I don't know if these fighters are the best in the Empire or just some of the many, but in any case the situation is not the best for us. Jiraiya said before looking to the right where Rock Lee was bathed in white light before vanishing, and I'm afraid Naruto has far too many monsters in his ranks. You, Sasuke and Guy are our best chance of success. Just you wait, I'll show these people how I am much stronger than them, said Sasuke while looking at Mato, who was announcing Rock Lee, complete with insults from the crowd. I hope so for you, brat, because I'm afraid the only thing you can beat them at is the amount of arrogance you have. And now his opponent. Mato gestured toward the second gate, which was slowly being opened, showing to everyone a large figure dressed in black advancing toward Rock Lee. For many years he has been called the strongest creature in the world, and even today his name makes humans, monsters and demons tremble with fear. One of the strongest martial artists in the Empire, if not the strongest. Ladies and gentlemen, he's the ogre. Yujiro Hanma. Rock Lee, thanks to his countless training sessions with Guy and many other ninjas, immediately realized that the man in front of him was a monster in every respect. His muscles, his presence, even his gaze, were something Rock Lee would only associate with a god or a demon. Bracing himself, the Konoha ninja assumed his fighting pose. Yash. May our duel be without regrets. I'll use everything I can to defeat you. For his part, Yujiro merely looked at him with calm, or maybe bored, eyes while holding his hands in the pockets of his trousers. Not even when Mato announced the start of the fight did he put up his guard, but Rock Lee did not wait and quickly sprinted towards his opponent before attempting a round kick to the head. His kick managed to find its target, yet for a single moment Rock Lee saw not Yujiro in front of him but a gigantic boulder. His opponent didn't even seem to have felt the attack at the base of his neck. Rock Lee tried another attack again, but this time Yujiro lowered himself at the last second, and only then did Rock Lee notice that his opponent had his left hand dangerously close to his groin, with the index finger held back by the thumb. Without even recognizing his opponent, Yujiro hit him with a finger in the jewels, and Rock Lee's soul almost went out of his body due to the physical pain. Yujiro did not even give him time to scream before grabbing his head with his left hand and smashing him to the ground with such force that he created cracks in all the ground of the arena. The ground shook for a few seconds before Yujiro released Rock Lee's now unconscious body. Mato quickly ran up to the two before declaring Yujiro the winner, while he looked at Rock Lee with bored eyes. Everything you can. You've definitely overrated yourself. The crowd cheered for his victory as Yujiro left and Rock Lee was taken to the infirmary, leaving Konoha's remaining ninja speechless. They didn't even have time to figure out what had happened that the white light enveloped Guy before taking him away. Is it me or these matches are getting shorter and shorter? Asked Mato, laughing with the crowd before gesturing toward the first gate. We are finally in the second half of the first stage of the tournament. It's time for the fifth fight, and the first participant is Rock Lee's sensei. Known as Konoha's sublime green beast of prey, he is arguably the strongest martial arts master in the East. He is Might Guy. As with all of Konoha's other ninja, Guy was greeted with bloodlust and insults, but nothing seemed to make him lose focus as he approached the center of the arena. In front of him, the second door began to open and his senses immediately alerted him to the approaching threat, even if it was an old man with little hair and a mustache. Now, his opponent. He needs no introduction since I think everyone knows him in the Empire. Currently the oldest hunter, he is still considered to be one of the strongest fighters in the entire world. Shouted Mato with the crowd already cheering for Guy's opponent. He's Isaac Netero. Isaac walked over to Guy before stopping and looking at him with calm eyes. I can see that you are one who cares a lot about the effort to prepare your body. Your muscles could also be the envy of several of my disciples. Guy nodded at him before assuming his fighting pose, already opening 2 of the 8 gates. Thank you for your words, but it's time to let our fists speak. I will defeat you and bring an alliance with the Empire to Konoha using my youth. I like your spirit, boy, smiled Netero while Mato announced the start of the match. Guy also immediately opened the third and fourth gates before vanishing in a burst of speed with the intent of finishing the fight as soon as possible. However, it is not my style to let young people win. Time stopped, or at least it seemed to Guy that time had stopped, and yet he saw Isaac move his arms slowly, still leaving afterimages with each movement. In what seemed like seconds to him, Guy saw Isaac raise his arms slightly before joining his hands in prayer, and a strong golden light began to grow behind Isaac, then creating a gigantic statue with countless arms. Still moving his arms slowly, Isaac made as if he wanted to slap something, and one of the giant hands mimicked his movement, before hitting Guy with a force far beyond anything he had ever felt, throwing him across the arena. In the eyes of the crowd, it seemed only that Guy had vanished into thin air before reappearing against the wall of the arena. Guy stood up looking at Isaac with shocked eyes before attempting to hit him again, but as before he didn't even have time to get close that the huge statue hit him and threw him back against a wall. You are able to see my technique, but you cannot react in time. This puts you in the upper range among my students, as many of them can't even see what's going on before they get hit, said Isaac with a smile on his face before swatting Guy away a third time. You're also more persistent than them. Over the next few minutes, Guy also managed to open the fifth and sixth gates, and, despite this allowing him to get closer to his opponent, Isaac continued to intercept and hit him without taking any damage. Finally, when Guy was at the end of his strength and his body covered with wounds and bruises, Isaac struck him from above with an open hand, crushing him against the ground and knocking him unconscious. The winner of the fifth match is Isaac Netero, announced Mato with the crowd cheering even more than before while the winner waved at them with a serene smile on his face before leaving the arena. In the meantime, a team of medics was carrying Guy toward the infirmary. I have to ask you, my love, how did these Konoha ninjas manage to stay strong all those years? Asked Tyr while looking at her husband. From what we have seen so far, only Might Guy would have any hope of surviving in our empire, and only in certain areas. The other villages weren't much better off, and Konoha used the veiled threat of the Kyuubi for many years to keep their opponents in line. Explained Naruto with a shrug. By their standards, Guy is an excellent ninja, but they must understand that the empire is very different from their lands. The crowd's insults and bloodlust drew their attention to the new fighter, Sai, the one who had taken his place within Team 7. Grinning at the pale shinobi, already knowing who his opponent was, Naruto made himself comfortable. It was time to see some real humiliation. Now, his opponent. The second gate began to open as heavy footsteps were heard in the arena. The Knight of Treachery, Knight of Londinium, Gorilla Knight, these are just some of the titles this knight is known for. Directly from the round table, the adopted daughter of Emperor Naruto, as well as the blood daughter of Empress Artoria. This is Mordred Pendragon. Sai carefully watched the knight in gray and red armor adorned with large horns, with a large sword clutched in his right hand. Mordred, on the other hand, thrust her weapon into the ground before tilting her head. Ah. Who the hell are you? I was hoping to fight one of Mother's former teammates. Sai arched an eyebrow. Mother. Your mother has never been to Konoha. I am the replacement for Naruto Uzumaki. Yes, that's Mother. Nodded Mordred as if it were the simplest thing in the world, yet her words threw Sai into a loop. He looked at Naruto and then at Mordred. Does that mean he doesn't have a? An overwhelming wave of bloodlust erupted from Mordred's body and she was in his face in a blink, shocking him. Insulting Mother will cost you dearly. And with a fist, she slammed his against the arena's wall. Sai immediately tried to react, but Mordred was immediately on him and kept hitting him using only her fists. However, after yet another punch, Sai exploded in a large amount of black ink and two black and white lions jumped at Mordred from behind. However, she destroyed them with a single punch. Quickly spotting her opponent, Mordred vanished in a burst of speed before punching him in the face, but once again she destroyed a clone of ink, angering her even more. Behind her, Sai quickly drew several birds with explosive cards tied to their legs and all of them flew towards the knight before causing a long series of explosions. Danzo's spy remained focused on the cloud of smoke generated by his explosions, but then was surprised to see that Mordred hadn't even moved and hadn't even suffered any damage. Turning to him, Mordred dashed toward her sword before generating red lightning bolts around her body and lunging at her opponent with a war cry. Sai swiftly banged on a large bird that came out of his parchment, but Mordred struck a mighty slash that released a torrent of red electricity. The attack was powerful enough to destroy Sai's ink bird and vaporize his right arm as well, causing him to fall to the ground. Before he could even hope to get up, Mordred pressed a foot against his chest before pointing the sword at his throat. "You're lucky this is a tournament, otherwise you would be dead already," hissed Mordred while Mato announced her victory. As the crowd chanted her name, Mordred leapt to the Emperor's grandstand, and her helmet seemed to vanish within the armor. "Mother. Father. Did you see that? That shouldn't even be considered a fight. He was too weak." Naruto chuckled at his surrogate daughter before ruffling her hair. "Or maybe you're too strong for them." Mordred blushed at his praise, before moving quickly and placing herself between his throne and that of Artoria, while the children in their arms smiled at their big sister. While many in the Empire knew of Mordred's ferocity on the battlefield, few knew of her unconditional love for her family, and all of her brothers and sisters were the center of the world for her, along with her father and mother. Artoria smiled at her before looking back into the arena. "Only 2 matches left." "Yes," nodded Naruto with a cold grin on his face. "The best always comes at the end." Only 3 more ninjas remained in the room, and only 2 of them would fight. Yet while Sasuke was still certain he could win against everyone else, Jiraiya and Kakashi were now certain that their defeat was near. This empire is made up of monsters. Guy was beaten as a simple genin and the others didn't stand a chance, said the Sannin with Kakashi nodding at his side before being enveloped by a white light. "Looks like Naruto wanted to keep you 2 for the end." Kakashi said nothing before being teleported, and shortly after he entered the arena, now used to insults and bloodlust. The last few encounters had shocked him more than they should, so much so that he had already entered the arena with his Sharingan uncovered. He had no idea what monster he was going to face, but he was sure he would have to use all his skills to try and win. "His opponent is one of the most famous heroes of the last war," said Mato while gesturing toward the second gate. "Electricity and lightning are at his command, and to this day few wizards can hope to prevail against him. The power to kill dragons runs through his veins. He is Laxus Drayar." Coming out into the open in a shower of applause, declarations of love and cheering, Laxus stopped in front of Kakashi with electric sparks dancing around his body. "So you're Naruto former sensei, huh?" asked Laxus, narrowing his eyes. "I hope you know that I will not go light on you." "I don't see why you should," replied Kakashi with a shrug while bringing out 2 kunai. "If you did, you would risk losing." "Begin." Kakashi immediately threw the 2 kunai, but Laxus' body became pure electricity and the man was immediately behind Kakashi before hitting him with a knee in the back, but the ninja was quickly replaced by a log of wood. "He is as fast as Minato sensei," thought Kakashi with shocked eyes while staring at his opponent from the other side of the arena. "And that technique, it looks like the one used by the Yondaime Reikage. Unfortunate that I am not very skilled in using wind jutsu." Quickly going through several hand seals, Kakashi then brought a hand to his mouth. "Fire release, great fireball technique." And a large ball of flames was hurled at Laxus, who stood motionless and let himself be hit by the attack. Despite the massive explosion that followed, Kakashi didn't get close to his opponent as he knew he couldn't have won that easily. His doubts were confirmed when he saw Laxus still standing with his arms crossed and just a little soot on his clothes. "That's all. From what Naruto has told us, you of Konoha should be very skilled in fire techniques, yet what you just used was something trivial. Natsu could do better even when he was a child," said Laxus with an arched eyebrow before moving his arms toward his opponent. "Raging Bolt." Kakashi quickly replaced himself with a log of wood before throwing several kunai with explosive tags, but Laxus disintegrated them all with another electric strike before lunging at his opponent. The ninja of Konoha managed to avoid the blows only thanks to his Sharingan, but it almost seemed that Laxus was getting faster and faster, and in the end he managed to hit him with a kick in the belly, throwing him to the ground. Narrowing his gaze, Laxus threw another bolt of lightning at Kakashi, but when it hit him, the ninja exploded in a cloud of white smoke and a deafening sound comparable to thousands of birds was heard behind him. "Reikiri." Laxus immediately turned and grabbed Kakashi's wrist before he could stab his shoulder, and, under the ninja's shocked eyes, Laxus opened his mouth and the electricity around Kakashi's hand was completely swallowed. Did he just eat my Reikiri? No matter how many times I eat it, the electricity produced by chakra always leaves a bad aftertaste in my mouth, said Laxus with clear disgust before grinning at his opponent while tightly squeezing his wrist, but at least now you can't escape anymore. Accumulating electricity around his right fist, in a Reikiri-like manner, Laxus struck Kakashi in the chest, roaring thunder. And Kakashi's Jonin vest was completely destroyed as he suffered several burns and broken ribs from the attack before falling to the ground. Running quickly towards him, Mato checked him for a moment before raising a hand. The 7th match is over. The winner is Laxus. The crowd exploded into a blaze of applause and glee as Laxus greeted the audience and Kakashi was carried away on a stretcher, much to Naruto's delight. To be able to see his former sensei defeated so easily was something he had always wanted since he arrived in the Empire 8 years ago. The only thing that would have made it better would have been if Naruto himself had been the one to defeat him, but as Emperor, Naruto had also learned to be patient and enjoy every victory. With that in mind, Naruto made a note to completely restore the Fairy Tail Guild at no expense spared. Well folks, it's finally time for the last match of the first phase, announced Mato before pointing towards the first gate which slowly began to open, the last Uchiha. The traitor Uchiha, the Emo King, the failed Avenger. These are just some of the titles he is famous for in his home village. He is Sasuke Uchiha. Walking into the arena, Sasuke could only glare with pure hatred the Pumpkin Man as he dared to denigrate his elite status in that way, but when he was close to making him understand his place, he was forced to stop after being assaulted by such an amount of bloodlust that even the Kyuubi paled in the face of such pressure. Not only the audience, but also Mato, the other attendees in their rooms and even the empresses were pouring all their hatred on him, making him sweat and making it hard for him to even breathe. This went on for a full minute before the pressure was lifted and Sasuke could breathe again. Without giving him another look, Mato turned towards the second door that was already opening, and now, his opponent. However, no one came out, nor did anyone seem to be behind the door. Seeing this, Sasuke grinned, "It seems your fighter is afraid of facing an elite Uchiha like me." Mato didn't deign to give him an answer, just raised his arm towards the sky and everyone, including Sasuke, looked up only to see what looked like a giant ball of fire falling from the sky. A legend, a calamity, a goddess, a messenger from hell. You can call her whatever you want and you will always be right, as she is the uncrowned undefeated lioness. Shouted Mato with the crowd already cheering like with no other fighter. She is the 4th Empress, the one who rules over all flames. She is Mereoleona Vermilion. The fireball crashed into the arena generating a strong tremor and a shock wave so strong that Sasuke had to apply chakra to his feet in order not to be blown away. Activating the Sharingan, he looked at the rising figure in the center of the smoking crater and saw a woman with long red hair wearing rather simple clothing and a cloak. Her blue eyes rested on him and for a moment Sasuke felt like he was looking at a blood-starved lioness. "Yo, so you are the cause of my beloved husband's exile?" asked Mereoleona cracking her knuckles with a feral grin and rising bloodlust. "I hope you are ready, puny Uchiha, because you will not come out of this arena on your own feet." Without delay, Mato quickly moved away before lifting an arm. Last match of the first phase of the tournament. Begin. Pain. That was all Sasuke felt as Mereoleona's fist slammed into his belly, throwing it directly into the door behind him. As soon as Mato had started the fight, she had disappeared from his sight and even with his Sharingan he had not been able to follow her movements before being hit. Now leaning against the door, badly damaged by the impact just happened, Sasuke could feel his internal organs upside down and with no way to avoid it he vomited blood, bile and saliva before putting a hand on his chest. Learning medical ninjutsu had not been his idea but Kakashi had determined that Itachi was unable to use any techniques of that category when he betrayed the village, which could have given Sasuke an advantage in his fight against his older brother. Thanks to that jutsu and the boost given by the cursed seal to his natural regeneration, Sasuke was cured within seconds and yet the pain was still present. After a deep breath, he glared at the woman in the center of the arena. "So you're one of that loser's whores, huh? When I'm done with you, you'll regret getting married to a loser like him." "Oh really?" asked Mereoleona without losing her smirk before looking at the small puddle at his feet, because that mixture of blood, saliva and bile you threw up makes me think that in the end it will be you who will regret it all, even the day you were born. Going through some very quick hand seals, Sasuke put a hand to his mouth, fire release, great fireball technique. Mereoleona did not move from her spot before igniting her hands and punching the incoming attack, overwhelming Sasuke's flames with her own, shocking him. The flames quickly dispersed into the air after devouring his attack, yet the last Uchiha felt a strong wave of hot air against his body. Next. So she fights with fire too, thought Sasuke before doing different hand seals, water release, wild water wave. Before spitting a large torrent of water against his opponent who, however, did not move until the last and indeed, hit his attack again, evaporating all the water in a single instant. Next. Sasuke looked at her with a mixture of shock and anger. He wasn't very adept at using water jutsu, but he was still very strong by village standards, yet this bitch had prevailed against his jutsu using flames of all things. Going in order, the water should prevail against the fire, not lose against it. Oi, if you're not going to move, I'll come to you, shouted Mereoleona before disappearing in a burst of speed. Knowing she was coming, Sasuke managed to avoid the punch aimed at his face before attempting to hit her with a knee in the chest, but she grabbed his knee, lifted him with no effort and threw him into the center of the arena, where he landed smoothly before hurling several balls of fire at her, yet Mereoleona destroyed them all with simple fire-cloaked fists. Gritting his teeth in anger, Sasuke decided to change his approach before going through several hand seals, lightning release, electromagnetic murder, and releasing a wave of electricity from his hands that destroyed the ground between him and his opponent. However, Mereoleona continued to grin before punching the incoming attack with a fiery fist, consuming all the electricity with her flames. Standing without a scratch, the Empress looked Sasuke straight in the eyes. Next. That woman was quickly making Sasuke lose his temper, and he felt mocked by her ability to resist all of his attacks. With one hand he drew his Chikudo before cloaking it in a layer of electricity and dashing toward Mereoleona to strike her from above. However, she did not attempt to block the blade or avoid the attack altogether. She punched the sword, and under Sasuke's shocked eyes, the blade broke just above the hilt, falling several meters away from him. His shock allowed Mereoleona to kick him in the chest. Sasuke managed to block her with both arms, but was thrown across the arena. A decent sword, I would say. If it had been one of our special swords, I would not have been able to break it, even though I know that you have several blades of remarkable workmanship and resistance in your villages, said Mereoleona, walking toward him with a grin on her face. And you hit it without even thinking twice. If it had been the Kusanagi sword used by Orochimaru, you would no longer have your entire right arm, thought Sasuke while healing his sore arms, while thanks to his Sharingan he saw that on Mereoleona's fingers there was a thin red line. His sword had barely marked her skin without even making her bleed. With his patience now exhausted and the thought of losing against her now nagging in his mind, Sasuke let himself go to the power of the cursed seal, and in a few moments his body was transformed. Big wings in the shape of hands came out of his back, as his skin took on a grayish tint and his hair lengthened, becoming lighter. Ooh, now you look like one of those demons we killed during the war, noted Mereoleona with her fists burning even more. Are you asking me to kill you, puny Uchiha? You are the one who will die, shouted Sasuke before unleashing a giant dragon made of fire from his mouth. The huge attack was a few meters from Mereoleona before fire enveloped her completely, and the flames took the form of two lion's paws, which she used to grab the dragon's head, shut its mouth and then hit it with another fist, destroying it. Sasuke didn't even have a chance to react before Mereoleona appeared in front of him and punched him in the face, breaking his nose. Konoha's ninja was smashed into the arena wall, but his opponent grabbed his throat before throwing him into the air and hit him with a giant lion paw. Upon impact with the ground, the air was knocked out of his lungs, and after a few seconds, Sasuke staggered to his feet before turning to his opponent. Damn you! Accumulating as much chakra as possible, Sasuke released another giant fire dragon from his mouth while throwing needles of electricity with his left hand and creating a long electric blade in his right hand with which he attempted to strike his opponent sideways. Mereoleona grinned even more before leaping up and moving through the air at staggering speed, destroying the fire dragon with one punch, dodging the needles with a quick right swipe, and smashing the electric blade with a second punch before stopping in front of Sasuke, storming him with several dozen fiery punches that sent him straight into the door he had entered. Sasuke threw up a lot of blood, using the huge door to get up as his head kept spinning. Looking at his opponent still standing in the center of the arena, Sasuke gritted his teeth in anger. That whore was ridiculing him in front of everyone. Him, an elite Uchiha. Blinded with anger now, Sasuke waited a few seconds to allow the cursed seal to heal his body just enough for him to fight before releasing a giant wave of fire from his mouth that completely covered Mereoliona's view. The woman prepared to wipe out that attack with her fists, but then in the midst of the roar of those flames she heard another sound, like a flock of 1,000 birds, and in an instant Sasuke leapt out of those flames with his right hand wrapped in black electricity, Chidori. Mereoliona watched with interest that attack before moving faster than Sasuke and grabbing his right wrist before forcing him to point it behind him and push his arm in that direction, causing him to hit his right wing, which was severed almost entirely. Sasuke screamed in pain before the flames of his own attack cauterized the wound, causing him to scream even more, and Mereoliona took the opportunity to quickly hit him in the face with more punches, causing him to spit teeth and blood. When Sasuke started to fall to the ground, Mereoliona prevented him from falling by holding him by the right wrist. "Are you done with your pretty tricks, puny Uchiha?" Sasuke could only glare at her without being able to move his body. "In that case, let's end this." Without any effort, Mereoliona hurled Sasuke into the air before being engulfed in a large amount of flames. Mana Zone. Calidus Brachium Barrage. A storm of fiery blows fell on Sasuke, who remained suspended in midair in the midst of those continuous explosions of flames. His skin was slowly burned away, his wings soon turned to ash, and his screams were lost amid the clamor of the audience and the explosions around him. The beating went on for over a minute before Mereoliona stopped, letting Sasuke fall to the ground, whose body was covered in horrific burns and even part of his hair was lost in that attack. It was a miracle that his Sharingan was still up and running. The winner of the match. The fourth Empress. Mereoliona Vermilion. The stadium shook in the rain of cheers, shouts of victory and compliments to the Empress as Sasuke stood helpless in the center of the arena. After greeting her subjects, Mereoliona jumped up to the Emperor's grandstand and looked at her husband with a grin. "Like the show, dear?" "Very much," nodded Naruto with a smile while his daughter tried to reach her mother, and Mereoliona leaned down to take her in her arms, giving her a kiss on the cheek. After greeting her fellow empresses as well, the woman went to sit in her seat while Naruto looked into the arena, where Sasuke had just stood up, and their gazes met. The Emperor didn't hold back from showing his former teammate a grin that seemed to mean, "I won." Something snapped in Sasuke's mind, who no longer heard anything around him, nor saw anything but Naruto's face and that victorious grin. The loser was grinning at him, as if he, an elite Uchiha, were just a bug. Him, who was just a damned orphan and who had never been able to do anything. Drawing on the last reserves of chakra within himself, Sasuke instantly created a Chidori in his right hand before jumping at Naruto with a battle cry. His target, Naruto's heart. Thanks for listening. In the next part. In the meantime, please leave a review. I would love to hear your feedback. Especially if it helps me improve the overall story.